Good night.
Okay.
Zera Shimshon.
Okay, we're going to do the second part of Torah Aleph. Torah Aleph is still, we're going to continue with Torah Aleph. Torah Aleph is quite long. We're going to try to get to the second piece. We'll get through the second piece, and even though it's a long piece, we'll try to get through it.
Wait, you did one already? The first piece you did?
First piece, that's the end of the first piece.
That's what we just did now?
That's the first piece. Now we're continuing. He's continuing with the idea of that we have to eat matzah, right? We know that the pasuk in Dvarim says that they didn't have time. We know that in the Vidui Ma'asrot, right, that we say during Pesach, during the Haggadah, we say we didn't have time to eat matzah. We didn't have time to. Right, and then it says then it says in pasuk Perek Tet Vav pasuk Gimel, it says Tet Vav, Tet Vav or Tet Zayin, Perek Tet Zayin. Excuse me, Tet Zayin.
Wait, what are we talking about? Which Parshat?
Dvarim Perek Tet Zayin pasuk Gimel.
Right.
Okay, so it says there that they didn't. Right, chipazon. They were out of haste. Okay, so and Rashi says that they were leaving Mitzrayim they were rushed before the time the dough had a chance to rise. So they're saying that they.
Which correlates to Yochlu Litva Mel.
Right, exactly. Hold on, he's going to get to that too, right? So he says.
I'm not giving him an easy time here.
Good, that's good. By the way, I just want to let you know that the other day I was learning with a friend of mine, Drew Schet, on Haggadah, and we came to a conclusion, and I wrote to Rav Zilberberg, who's the head, and I said, can we make this conclusion? And he's like, oh, I've never thought about that. I'm going to have to think about it. Because we came up with a chiddush, because I was like, I'm pushing. This other guy came and he's like, I don't understand. Because what Perik Chet, Drew Schet, well, quickly, they says, why does the Baal HaGadol the Baal HaGadol, again, he says, like, why do we need to bring Sefer Devarim and from Shemot? Like, why do we bring proof when we talk about Aramiyah V'Davi? The whole thing comes through, and then we bring psukim from Shemot to support what is said in Sefer Devarim. That doesn't make sense, right? It's pretty straightforward what's going on there, and a whole thing there. But there's like a part of it is that we scream to Avotenu. And so most of us say we scream to our forefathers, but that doesn't make sense according to the Zera Shimshon. And then I said that maybe there's a combination between two things. Anyway, in the first part of the drush that we just said, he said that the fact that their dough was baked as matzah had no connection to their speed or leaving early, right? So they had to bake matzah in any case due to the Isur Chametz. And so he said that the pasuk that was brought by the Haggadah does not explain why they ate matzah. Was not offering a reason why they have to eat matzah, to have a mitzvah to eat matzah. The Haggadah was explaining only that why the mitzvah to eat matzah is appropriate even while they were in Galut. In the second part, that's Chilik Bet of Drush Aleph, if you will, right? Zera Shimshon is going to explain how our matzah recalls the Yetziah Mitzrayim and how to understand another difficulty. So he says, what does it mean to have to be b'chipazon? Haste. Right now we have with the above approach, which we just said before, which is that it was nothing to do with the fact that regarding the pasuk that says they were driven out of Mitzrayim and they could not delay. According to the Pshat Pasuk, it says that the pasuk says that they were driven out. The fact that it says that they were driven out explains why they couldn't bake the matzah, meaning they had to make matzah because they didn't have time for the dough to rise, right? Which was why the matzah that we eat today is basically saying that it seems like it was almost like an accident, right? In other words, why did we eat matzah? We ate matzah because we didn't have time. Right, they weren't prepared, so therefore we're eating matzah because they made a mistake, right? That's what it sounds like. Again, of course, sounds very simple about it, but okay. He says, how could it be that because of their, I don't want to call it mistake, but their rush, we have to suffer for a whole week eating matzah? Like, that doesn't make sense.
Now listen, I don't have it in front of me.
But
the clue to me is that when they're eating the korban, how do they eat it?
Right.
Meaning it was imminent.
Right.
They were about to leave.
Right.
Meaning it's not like they made a mistake. It
right.
was like
they were just waiting for the second to go, and they had to right. So that's I think he gets to that here or in the next one part of it. Anyways, so he says. The mishum devar ekrai ech yavo lanu chiyuv karet b'achlit matzah. How could we even? He says even more so. Mele, we eat the matzah, but now we have a isur. We have a isur of karet. It's not only like that. Now, I can understand that I'm eating matzah to remember the mitzvah. Okay, I got it. But now I'm saying is not only do I have to remember the mitzvah. If I eat chametz, I have an isur karet. That's a big deal.
And the whole thing of that isur karet is because they didn't have enough time.
Right. It sounds weak. Right. So that's what he's saying. So he says, according to many of the way we are, according to our interpretation on the pasuk, the first part of the drush, we are not saying that they were right. We are not saying that they were made mistake. They made the matzah by mistake when they were leaving. Rather, the reason why we eat matzah is, as the mefarshim say, al ki bechipazon yatzat Mitzrayim. You left Mitzrayim with haste. Shim lo haya golam techem miyad. They explain that if Hashem would not have left them right away at that moment, what would happen? We know that they would have already sunk to the 49th level of Tumah. Had they left gotten to the right, Chas v'shalom lo haya yolem ot takana. Tikva, excuse me. Mishum hachi ba lanu tzivur shel achilat matzah uviur chametz. Right, this is why we are commanded to eat matzah and destroy the chametz from our midst. To allude to this fact that there was that moment, like you said. There was not enough time to wait until they completed their efforts to defeat the klipot. Because had they left 1 second later, they would have been stuck. There was nothing. We would have no chance. Right. So he says, they didn't have. In the meantime, they would not have reached. They would have reached the 50th level of Tumah, right? And then they wouldn't have been able to save themselves. As the Gemara in Brachot says in Daf Hey of Brachot, Ein chavush matir atzmo mibeit asrim. A prisoner cannot free himself out of prison, right? That is, even if someone has the ability to save others from prison, right? If he is placed in prison, he will be unable to save himself, right? So he's saying is, with their own efforts, Bnei Israel would not have been able to take themselves out of the lowest level of Tumah, right? To commemorate the fact that they couldn't get themselves out of that last level of Tumah, Hashem had to take us out out of that, between that 49 and 50, that split second, Hashem take us out, and therefore we're eating matzah to commemorate the fact it wasn't like a rush, right? Like you said, it was that moment. We were ready, but we just didn't know when, so we just had to just get up and go. Right. Now he says, he says, now he moves away from the matzah for a second, and he says, I have a question, right? It focuses on the whole idea of chipazon, what is the whole point of the chipazon? That Hashem took us out of Mitzrayim b'chipazon, and we're on page 627, around the middle of the page there. So he says, why we have a question, what Hashem did. Lama hibtin legalinu ad zibula batra. Why did Hashem wait till that last possible moment to take us out? Hayalu lakdim leMitzrayim hamakot ezazman kodem k'dei leotzianu l'shol b'chipazon. Like he says, I don't understand this whole thing of chipazon. Right? Hashem knew what was going to happen.
But it was a timed chipazon.
Right, exactly. So he says, if it was timed chipazon, the opposite. If it's timed chipazon, what shall you do? Give me 5 extra minutes. I don't need it to be. I don't need to be rush. Right? That doesn't make sense. If I knew already that we're going to leave, bring everything back, push everything back up a little bit, 5 minutes by each makkah, and then let them walk out panacha. Why do I have to do this chipazon thing?
Meaning the kushya that we have, at least for me, is that there's 2 scenarios.
Right.
One is them eating Korban Pesach.
Right.
And they're sitting,
relaxing and enjoying. Right.
With their families.
Right.
But they're like chayalim.
Right.
With their konenut.
Right. They're konenut. Right.
On them.
Right.
They're stick and they're ready to go, but they're sitting.
Right. That is matzah. That's when they can eat the shawarma. Right. That's when they eat the shawarma. The dough. It's nice. They can eat it. Possible. Good. Second, stage 2 is now they're like, wait a minute, what are we going to take with us? So there we're taking matzah balls. Not the matzah balls that we know, but the matzah dough. They put it on their sack, and they're like, we're waiting for that moment, and that's why we're making the dough here, but we're not cooking it because we want to save it for there. Okay, yeah, go ahead. That's scenario number 1. Scenario 2.
Right, but your question about 5 more minutes is basically that the rush was self-imposed.
I see what you're saying. Meaning that they're like, we don't want to wait for the call. We're just going to go out and do it. Like
meaning. You're done with your. I'm saying if I had to paint a picture.
Right, like you're saying.
I'm saying like they had their shawarma. It's night, right?
Right.
No one's stopping you from
leaving.
Preparing.
Preparing,
even if you don't know when it is.
That's exactly right. That's what they did. They prepared everything, but they didn't know when, so they kept on working the dough and saying, we're going to make the dough now, so that way when we do get into Tachat Kanfei HaShechina, we can make the matzah. We can make a matzah, because matzah is the ideal scenario.
Because if not for that explanation, there's no reason why they couldn't have made left with matzot.
Right. Now that's what he says, but he says, he still has a question. Why couldn't we just be... He said, it sounds like Hashem was kind of forcing us to leave b'chipazon.
Right.
That doesn't make sense. He says that according to in Baba Kama Daf Kaf Zayin, it says, a person may not enforce himself, whether a person may enforce the law for himself. Let's say a person sees a robber carrying one of his belongings, meaning Reuven lost something, a robber stole something from Reuven, and he sees that the Shimon, the robber, or Joe, the robber, has his thing. Right. Well, the question is whether he can enforce the law on himself. Meaning, can I be the cop and say, dude, you just stole something from me? Or do I have to call the cop and say, wait for the cop to come? Right? All agree that if there will be a loss, if he does not take any action, a person may enforce the law for himself. Right. Again, now you have to define what is a loss. Okay, whatever. Anyway, so he says, right? He said, if they do not free them, right, they would have been stuck in the noon. Right. Right. He says, had the Bnei Israel waited, the loss would have been that all of Bnei Israel would have been wiped out basically off the earth. So that's the end of the Vo'il Shadin Hu, right? Avid Inish Ladina Nafshe, Afilu Bahaka'a, right? Kanirem Shami Ashas Midivya Rosh Vayin Sham, Mishum Hachi Lo Ratzar Kadosh Baruch Hu La'amida Davar Bedin. Right? He didn't want to choose to bring the matter to court. Hashem could have taken the Bnei Israel out earlier, but he would have to do so legally. I mean, he would have to give like the whole, Shakla Vitaria with all his court. Right? Justified, right? Addressing all the against them. Elohim Tin Achabarli Depsida. I mean, he said, if I do it at that moment of 49 to 50, then I'm basically forcing the hand. Right? What was he doing? He's saying is otherwise I have to start dealing with the other side, right? The side of the
anything else besides that.
Right. Or why do they deserve to leave at all? Right? They did all these other things. Right. So he says, I don't want to do that. So Hashem is forcing their hand and saying, is if I get them to that last possible second, right? We all know, right? We always have these Yeshuot, right? You're stuck at something. I can tell you this week. I had this crazy story of Yeshua, right? We had a court date for something. We were suing an airline. And I really didn't want to go. I really didn't want to go. There was nothing on the top of 10 things of me not doing. That was number one, and maybe even higher than that. And I was like, I just don't want to go. And I was just like, I don't know how we're going to get out of this. I told my wife, I just don't want to go. I davened. I said everything. I said, I just don't want to go. And I was just like, we're going to have to get, but there was no way to get around it. And then finally, the day comes, and they're like, okay, you have to be there at whatever time. And I was like, listen, I have a really important meeting. If I'm late, I'm running the meeting. It's not even like I can pass it. I'm the meeting. Yeah, it happened this week, Sunday. So I had a meeting, and I said, I can't miss it. And the meeting was originally going to be last week, but it got pushed off to this week. So I was like, I have this meeting. I can't not be there. So I'm like, listen, I'm taking my computer. If we get late, I'm just going to jump out. I don't care, court, no court, whatever. As we're about to get to the tunnel, and they get a call saying, okay, it's been delayed. We tried everything. Like we were doing, the court called us and said we're being delayed. So I was like, all right, it seems like that moment, you're waiting for that moment to happen. Everyone's had those stories. We're waiting for that moment. All right, so we're going to have to stop in a second. Anyways, it does say, what's the reason? We'll skip it. But anyway, the idea, what he brings in this drush is that Hashem he purposely waited for that last possible moment, the chipazon moment, in order so that we wouldn't have to start dealing with the legal issue of do they deserve to leave, do they not deserve to leave, what about this chait that they did here, what about this chait that they did here, and he brings other proofs. He brings other situations where this moment of Yeshua happens throughout the Tanakh and other stories. Amen.
Politically, all these discussions about do you take preemptive measure in war, and then you're going to have to justify why you did it. Right. So a lot of times it's like, well, we'll wait till they'll do the attack, and then we'll be able to do it. And we'll be able to
Well, it's better to be on the defensive than to worry about it before, and then say, how do we explain what we're about to do?
Right. Wow, I'm just so happy about it. Great.
Yeah, Tov Hashem.
One more thing.
My children never comes out on Shabbos.
You know what? I never have a good chocolate because I don't make chocolate. It's my wife who makes the chocolate.
Don't worry about
That's
the last two games.
She makes a wicked chocolate.
What'd you say?
I said the last two Yankee games
the
were
meat
not
in
bad. They're
here-
doing well.
Oh, they're hitting the
Always
ball.
dry.
They're hitting a lot of home
Yeah,
runs.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. I watched the first three
might-
They
games.
have those new bats now.
I was watching the
My
first
wife
three
likes
games.
it here.
Rocket bats.
Torpedo bats.
Torpedo bats.
I watched the first three games with my
Yeah.
sons. I was just like, wow, they're just crushing the ball. There's not even like a shy line at the ball. How many? What? Your bar mitzvah?
Yo, dude.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. By the way, I davened already. Did you daven already?
Yeah, you still got a whistle. Where's the other one?
I'm speaking at.
You have 9.
For it home?
Wow, I'm gonna tell Chaim this was really good.
Good. Give him some good feedback.
Cool.
So you gotta take this one home too.
Ellie, is this still going?
My wife.
I never